Good afternoon, everyone. This presentation looks to conclude whether biculturalism and multiculturalism is adequately covered in the New Zealand primary and secondary school curriculum. To start with, I've prepared some data on the historical population and changes to the New Zealand population. When we look at the data, it shows us that in the year 1250 AD was when the first Māori came to New Zealand from Polynesia. For the next 500 years, Māori would be the only inhabitants of New Zealand Aotearoa. In the 1700s, following settlement in Australia, Europeans started migrating to New Zealand. 100 years later, at the turn of the century in 1800, there were 50 Europeans and 100,000 Māori living in New Zealand. A further 100 years on, in 1900, due to the government-assisted migration schemes in place, the population rose to 750,000 people. And then 100 years on, so today, there are now 4.4 million people living in New Zealand. This amounts to a massive increase in a really short amount of time. Let's have a look at the ethnic population of New Zealand, the current and the future population trends. Okay, at the moment we have 74% of people living in New Zealand who were born in New Zealand. The other 26% of people living in New Zealand were born overseas. New Zealand has people from 213 different ethnicities living here. We have more ethnicities than we have countries in the world. It's a very diverse culture in New Zealand. And in the year to June this year, there were 85,000 people migrating annually, and this figure is set to rise. Moving along, we look at the research in New Zealand for biculturalism and multiculturalism inclusion in the school curriculum. Up until 2002, there were no major studies undertaken in New Zealand based on this research. In 2002, the New Zealand Government commissioned research into inclusiveness in the curriculum. These outcomes were pretty favourable. The only real recommendations they chose to present were that teachers were provided to have more judgment-based knowledge on understanding and skills for teaching inclusion. In the years following, the Ministry developed Te Kite Parangi, which is a website providing resources for teachers in schools, kura and whānau, families, on how to include biculturalism and multiculturalism, and also includes other extensive areas on the curriculum in New Zealand. This is only available in an online format. It contains valuable resources on how to embed these things into the curriculum. Okay, and there is a special new resource on the website called Inclusiveness, a Guide for Schools. In 2010, the Educational Review Office conducted some research into how many schools were demonstrating inclusion into their practices. The outcomes were pretty good. Over 50% demonstrated inclusiveness at a high quality level, with a 30% level demonstrating an adequate level of inclusiveness. Following this research, the benchmark was set to ensure that more schools met the high quality inclusiveness rate. We move on to asking the question of how schools and kura include and embed multiculturalism and biculturalism into their curriculum. We can see by this graphic that there are many ways in which schools can do this, and they don't just involve the school children, they involve the whole community and family as well. Okay, some of these ways include kapa haka, sports, class and whole school projects, dance and drama. They embed it into literacy and numeracy, and they include other such things as school fairs, art and craft, and cultural and festival days. Language teaching as well, embedded into the curriculum, is a big factor in biculturalism and multiculturalism. So my conclusion today as to the question if schools effectively prepare the coming generations to live together in what's fast becoming one of the most diverse cultures in the world, is yes, I believe that schools are well equipped to provide quality delivery and choices to enable this. However, I think there is also a responsibility, as I've said here in my presentation, that whānau and friends and families support children in this area by providing good role modelling. After all, it truly does take a whole village.